Dad perfect events. I came home at lunch. My wife was in the pool with my son-in-law. I saw the lubricant bottle on the nightstand. Silently, I swapped the liquid for industrial glue and locked the door. An hour later, the firefighters couldn't stop laughing. My name is Charles Miller, and at 58 years old, I never thought 29 years of marriage could crumble in the span of a single lunch break. After 32 years as a police detective, I believed I had seen enough of human nature to predict its patterns. Tuesday mornings meant oatmeal and black coffee. Wednesday evenings brought Dorothy's book club. Thursdays were reserved for yard work and quiet dinners. Our life had settled into a comfortable rhythm, or so I thought. That Tuesday started like any other. Dorothy Miller kissed my cheek goodbye as she left for her job at the hospital administration office. Her perfume lingered in the kitchen long after her car disappeared down Maple Street. At 55, she still moved with the confidence of a woman who knew her place in the world. I envied that certainty. I had been retired for 2 years now after spending 32 years in law enforcement. My pension of $3,400 a month, combined with Dorothy's salary of $4,200, kept us comfortable in our modest 2-story home. Nothing extravagant, nothing that would draw attention. That was how I preferred it. The morning dragged on with its usual mundane tasks. I watered Dorothy's rose garden, sorted through bills, and attempted to fix the squeaky hinge on the garage door. By 11:30, my stomach was growling, and I remembered the leftover meatloaf Dorothy had prepared the night before. A quick drive home for lunch seemed like the perfect break from my aimless retirement routine. I pulled into our driveway at exactly 12:15, noting that Dorothy's Honda was parked in its usual spot. Strange. She typically ate lunch at her desk, always complaining about having too much work to leave the office. Maybe she had come home sick. I used my key quietly, not wanting to wake her if she was resting. The house felt different somehow, charged with an energy I couldn't identify. The living room was empty, but I could hear muffled voices coming from the direction of our backyard pool. Dorothy had been after me for months to use the pool more often. "We spend all that money maintaining it, Charles, and you never even get in," she would say. Perhaps she had decided to take her own advice and was enjoying a midday swim. I moved through the kitchen toward the sliding glass door that led to our patio, but something stopped me before I reached it. Through the window, I could see 2 figures in the water. Dorothy was there just as I had expected, but she wasn't alone. Victor Hayes, our son-in-law, was with her. At first, my mind tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Perhaps he had come to check on Dorothy. Perhaps there was some family emergency involving our daughter Linda. But as I watched, frozen behind the kitchen curtains, the truth became unavoidably clear. They weren't just swimming. Dorothy's arms were wrapped around Victor's neck, her legs around his waist. They moved together in the water with an intimacy that made my chest tighten and my hands tremble. This wasn't casual, this wasn't innocent. This was deliberate, passionate, and devastating. I watched my wife of 29 years kiss the man who had married our only daughter, Linda Miller, 5 years ago. I watched her touch him the way she used to touch me, back when we still touched at all. I watched Victor's hands explore her body with a familiarity that spoke of practice, of repetition, of time invested in learning what pleased her. My legs felt weak. I gripped the kitchen counter, the granite cold against my palm, and tried to make sense of what I was witnessing. How long had this been going on? How many times had they met like this while I puttered around the house, oblivious and trusting? The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. It wasn't just Dorothy's infidelity that wounded me. It was Victor's. This was the man who sat at our dinner table every Sunday, who called me Pops when he wanted to borrow tools, who had promised to love and honor our daughter. I backed away from the window, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My police training kicked in automatically. Don't react emotionally. Observe, document, plan. I had spent 3 decades building cases against people who thought they were smarter than the system. This situation required the same methodical approach. Walking mechanically through our house, I found myself in our bedroom. Everything looked the same as it had that morning when I made the bed and straightened Dorothy's jewelry on the dresser. But now I saw it differently. I saw it as the stage for her deception, a crime scene waiting to be processed. That's when I noticed the small bottle on Dorothy's nightstand. At first I thought it was hand lotion, but as I picked it up, I realized what it was: personal lubricant. The expensive kind that Dorothy had claimed we didn't need anymore back when we still shared physical intimacy. She had prepared for this. She had planned for Victor to come here, to our bed, to our sacred space. The calculation of it made me nauseated. I stood there holding that bottle, and something inside me shifted. The hurt began to transform into something harder, colder. If Dorothy wanted to play games, if she wanted to treat our marriage as something disposable, then perhaps it was time she learned that actions have consequences. I walked to the garage where I kept my workshop supplies. Among the various bottles and containers, I found what I was looking for. Industrial strength adhesive, the kind used for permanent bonds, the kind that warned on the label about skin contact, and the need for immediate medical attention if misused. Back in the bedroom, I carefully emptied the lubricant bottle and refilled it with the clear, viscous adhesive. The consistency was similar, enough that it would pass casual inspection, but the effects would be dramatically different. I placed the bottle back exactly where I had found it, then quietly locked the bedroom door from the inside before slipping out through the bathroom that connected to the hallway. If they wanted privacy for their encounter, I would ensure they got more than they bargained for. I returned to the kitchen and sat at our breakfast table, the same table where Dorothy and I had shared coffee that morning, where she had kissed my cheek goodbye before heading off to work, or so I had thought. Through the window, I could see them still in the pool, still wrapped in their passionate embrace. Part of me wanted to storm outside and confront them immediately. Part of me wanted to pack a bag and leave forever. But a larger part of me wanted to see how this would play out. Wanted to witness the consequences of their choices unfold naturally. I made myself a sandwich with the leftover meatloaf and waited. My police instincts told me it wouldn't be long before they moved their activities indoors, before they discovered my little modification to their plans. As I ate, I thought about the man I had been just an hour earlier, that Charles Miller had been naive, trusting, perhaps willfully blind to the cracks in his marriage. But that man was gone now, replaced by someone who understood that sometimes the people you love most are the ones most capable of destroying you. The clock on the microwave read 12:52. It wouldn't be much longer now. Exactly 1 hour and 7 minutes after I had made my discovery, the screaming started. It began as muffled shouts from upstairs, then escalated into genuine panic. Dorothy's voice high and desperate, calling for help. Victor's deeper tone, cursing in a way that would have made our daughter Linda blush. The sound of frantic movement, furniture scraping against the floor, and then Dorothy's voice again, this time pleading. "Call 911! Call 911!" I finished the last bite of my sandwich and calmly walked to the phone. When the operator answered, I let genuine concern color my voice. "I need an ambulance at 1-527 Maple Street. I think there's been some kind of accident. My wife is screaming upstairs." Within 12 minutes, our quiet suburban street was transformed into a circus. Fire truck, ambulance, and 2 police cars lined the curb. Neighbors emerged from their houses, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Patterson from next door clutched her bathrobe and craned her neck to get a better view. I met the paramedics at the front door, playing the role of the confused, worried husband. "I just got home from running errands," I explained, wringing my hands appropriately. I heard shouting from upstairs. "The bedroom door is locked, and they're not responding to my calls." The fire department made quick work of our bedroom door. What they found inside would become neighborhood legend within the week. Dorothy and Victor were indeed stuck together, courtesy of the industrial adhesive I had substituted for their intended lubricant. They had managed to separate themselves from each other partially, but not without leaving Victor with several square inches of skin adhered to various parts of Dorothy's anatomy, and vice versa. The look of mortification on both their faces almost made the entire ordeal worthwhile. "How did this happen?" asked Lieutenant Rodriguez, the fire department's ranking officer, as his team worked to free the trapped couple using specialized solvents. Dorothy, wrapped in a sheet and trying to maintain some dignity, shot me a look of pure venom. "The bottle," she managed through gritted teeth. "Someone must have switched the contents." "Switched?" I asked, allowing confusion to cloud my features. Who would do such a thing? And why would someone come into our house to tamper with personal items? Victor, red-faced and focused on the paramedic treating his adhesive burns, muttered something about accidents and bad manufacturing. The paramedics exchanged glances. This wasn't the first time they had been called to unusual adhesive emergencies, but it was clearly one they would remember. "We're going to need to transport both of you to General Hospital," announced the lead paramedic, a competent-looking woman in her 40s. Those chemical burns need proper treatment, and we need to make sure there's no permanent damage. As Dorothy was helped onto a stretcher, still partially covered by a sheet, she grabbed my arm. Her fingernails dug into my skin, and her voice was barely a whisper. "We need to talk." I nodded solemnly, the picture of a concerned husband. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll follow the ambulance to the hospital." But I didn't follow the ambulance. Instead, I waited until the street cleared of emergency vehicles and curious neighbors before I went back inside my house. I needed time to think, to plan my next moves, and to savor the small victory I had just achieved. The bedroom was a disaster. Chemical solvents had stained the carpet. The bed sheets were ruined, and the entire room would need to be aired out for hours. But it was fitting somehow. The scene of Dorothy's betrayal had been properly desecrated. I was sitting in my living room, considering my options, when Linda Miller's car pulled into the driveway. My daughter burst through the front door without knocking, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Dad, what the hell happened here?" she demanded, still wearing her work clothes from the marketing firm where she worked. "Victor called me from the hospital. He said there was some kind of accident with Mom, but he wouldn't explain what kind of accident requires chemical burn treatment." I studied my daughter carefully. Linda had always been closer to her mother than to me, and she had developed an unfortunate tendency to side with Dorothy in any family dispute. But she was also my only child, and despite everything, I loved her. "Your mother and Victor were injured in what appears to be an industrial adhesive accident," I said carefully. "I'm not sure how it happened. I came home from running errands and found them in distress." Linda stared at me, her eyes narrowing. "Victor was here in the middle of the day? Why?" "I assumed he had come to check on your mother. Perhaps she had called him because she wasn't feeling well." "Dad?" Linda sat down across from me, her voice taking on the patient tone she used when explaining marketing concepts to difficult clients. "Victor doesn't just come by during the day to check on Mom. He was at work. He left work to come here, and now they're both at the hospital with adhesive burns." What really happened? The moment had arrived sooner than I expected, but I was prepared for it. "Linda, I think you need to ask your husband and your mother that question." "What's that supposed to mean?" I reached for my laptop and opened a folder I had been compiling over the past few weeks. My police instincts had been nagging at me for months about Dorothy's behavior. Late nights at work, unexplained phone calls, sudden interest in new clothes and perfume. I had started a quiet investigation without even realizing it. It means that when I came home today, I discovered some things that have made me question everything I thought I knew about our family. Linda's face went pale. "Dad, please don't tell me you think what I think you're thinking." "What do you think I'm thinking? You think Mom and Victor were together? Like, together? I turned the laptop screen toward her, showing a spreadsheet I had created tracking Dorothy's unexplained absences from work, cross-referenced with Victor's construction schedule. Your mother called in sick 8 times in the past 2 months. Each time corresponded with a day Victor was working at remote job sites where his supervisor couldn't verify his presence. Linda stared at the data, her marketing background making her immediately understand the implications of the correlation. This could be coincidence. Could be. I clicked to another tab, but then there's this. Phone records showing 47 calls between Dorothy and Victor's personal cell phones over the past month, many lasting 20 to 30 minutes and occurring during work hours. "Why were you tracking Mom's phone calls?" "Because our phone bill jumped $80 last month, and when I asked Dorothy about it, she claimed she didn't know why." So, I did what any retired cop would do. I investigated. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I let the silence stretch until Linda's discomfort was visible in every line of her body. "Your mother and Victor were found in a compromising position in our bedroom," I said finally. "The rest, I think, speaks for itself." Linda shot to her feet, her hands clenched into fists. "That's impossible. Mom would never do that. Victor would never do that. You're being paranoid and jealous and ridiculous." "Am I?" "Yes. And even if something weird happened, even if there was some misunderstanding, you don't just let people get hurt with industrial adhesive. If you switch that lubricant, if you did this on purpose, that's assault." I raised an eyebrow. "That's quite an accusation, Linda. Are you suggesting I deliberately harmed your mother and husband?" "I don't know what I'm suggesting. I just know that none of this makes sense." The front door opened again, and Dorothy walked in, moving carefully and wearing a hospital gown under Victor's jacket. Her face was drawn with pain and humiliation, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. Victor followed behind her, walking with an obvious limp and sporting several large bandages on his arms and torso. He looked like he had been in a fight and lost badly. "Mom!" Linda rushed to Dorothy's side. "Are you okay?" "What happened?" Dorothy finally looked at me, and in her eyes I saw something I had never seen before. Fear. Not just embarrassment or anger, but genuine fear of what I might say next. "Your father," Dorothy said, "carefully seems to believe that Victor and I were engaged in inappropriate behavior. Were you?" I asked quietly. The question hung in the air like smoke. Victor shifted uncomfortably, favoring his injured leg. Linda looked back and forth between her mother and husband, searching their faces for the truth she didn't want to find. "Charles," Dorothy said, her voice taking on a tone I recognized from 29 years of marriage. The tone she used when she was about to attempt to manage me. "You're upset. You're confused. But making wild accusations won't help anyone." "I'm not making accusations," I replied calmly. "I'm asking questions. Simple, direct questions that deserve simple, direct answers." Victor finally spoke, his voice rough from the morning's ordeal. "Look, Pops," Charles. "I know how this looks, but don't call me Pops," I interrupted, and the sharpness in my voice surprised even me. "Whatever you are to this family, Victor, you lost the right to call me Pops today." Linda gasped. "You can't just decide that. Victor is my husband. He's part of this family." I turned to look at my daughter, this young woman who had once sat on my lap and called me the best daddy in the world, who had run to me when she was frightened and trusted me to fix everything that was broken in her small world. "Linda," I said gently, "family members don't betray each other the way your husband and mother have betrayed you and me." The words hit her like physical blows. I could see her trying to process what I was really saying, trying to reconcile the people she trusted most with the accusations I was making. "This is insane," she whispered. "This whole day is insane." But I could see doubt creeping into her expression. She was looking at Victor differently now, noting how he wouldn't meet her eyes, how he stood closer to Dorothy than to his own wife. "There's something else you all need to know," I said, closing the laptop and reaching for another folder. "Something that changes everything about this situation." 3 days after what I now call the adhesive incident, I discovered that my family's betrayal ran deeper than adultery. I was sitting in my home office, paying bills and managing our modest finances, when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see a woman in a business suit carrying a leather briefcase. Her car, a sleek black sedan, suggested she wasn't selling encyclopedias. "Mr. Miller," she asked when I opened the door. "My name is Helen Foster. I'm from Sunset Senior Living Solutions. I believe your family has been in contact with us." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Sunset Senior Living was the most expensive assisted living facility in our county, the kind of place families sent elderly relatives when they wanted them comfortable but out of the way. "I think there's been a mistake," I said carefully. "I haven't contacted any senior living facilities." Helen consulted her tablet, frowning. "According to our records, your daughter Linda Miller initiated contact with us 3 weeks ago. She indicated that you were experiencing some cognitive decline and that the family was exploring residential care options. 3 weeks ago, before the pool incident, before I had discovered Dorothy's affair, they had been planning to warehouse me." "And what exactly did my daughter tell you about my condition?" I asked. Helen looked uncomfortable but continued reading from her tablet. "She mentioned that you've been having memory issues, confusion about finances, and some aggressive episodes. She was particularly concerned about your ability to continue living independently. Aggressive episodes, memory issues, financial confusion. They had built an entire narrative around my unfitness, creating a foundation for removing me from my own life. May I ask, who else has been involved in these discussions?" "Well, your wife Dorothy Miller also attended our facility tour last week. She seemed very concerned about your welfare and asked detailed questions about our memory care unit. Dorothy had toured the facility. While I was puttering around the house, believing I was living a quiet retirement with a faithful wife, she was shopping for places to stash me so she could continue her affair with my son-in-law." "And the financial arrangements?" Helen shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Miller indicated that you have a modest pension and some savings, but that the family would need to supplement the costs. Our monthly rate is $3,800, so additional family support would be necessary." $3,800 a month, more than my entire pension. They planned to drain our savings to pay for my imprisonment, while Dorothy and Victor enjoyed their newfound freedom. After Helen left, I sat in my office staring at the financial documents spread across my desk. Bank statements, investment records, pension paperwork, all the mundane evidence of a life lived responsibly, but none of it told the real story of my financial situation. The real story was locked in a safety deposit box across town, in documents I had never shared with Dorothy or Linda. I drove across town to First National Bank, where I had maintained a safety deposit box for the past 4 years. The contents of that box were going to reshape my family's understanding of power and control. Inside the box were documents that told a very different story about Charles Miller's financial situation. Stock certificates, property deeds, investment accounts, all stemming from an inheritance I had received after my Uncle Edmund's death in 2020. Edmund had been my mother's oldest brother, a bachelor who had spent his life quietly accumulating wealth through careful investments and frugal living. When he died at age 87, he left his entire estate to me, his only surviving nephew, $2,800,000. I had told no one about the inheritance, not even Dorothy. My police training had taught me to be cautious about revealing information until I understood all the players and their motivations. Something had held me back from sharing the news, some instinct for self-preservation that I hadn't fully understood at the time. Now I was grateful for that instinct. The money had been invested conservatively, generating enough income to more than double my apparent financial resources. But I had continued to live on my pension, maintaining the fiction that we were a middle-class couple with modest means. That evening, I called Patricia Stone, the finest divorce attorney in the state. Her reputation for being ruthless, meticulous, and expensive was legendary. Her hourly rate of $450 would have been impossible on my pension, but it was pocket change against my real net worth. "Mr. Miller," she said during our phone consultation, "based on what you've told me, this could be one of the most clear-cut cases of marital misconduct I've seen in 15 years of practice. Your wife committed adultery, conspired to have you declared incompetent, and attempted to gain control of assets she believed that you possessed. What can we expect in terms of settlement?" Patricia's voice carried a predatory edge. "In this state, adultery is grounds for fault-based divorce. Given the evidence you've compiled and the fact that your inheritance is separate property, I believe we can ensure your wife receives only what she's entitled to under law, which is essentially nothing." The next morning, I arranged for Dorothy to be served with divorce papers at her office. I wanted the humiliation to be public, witnessed by her colleagues who would gossip about it for months. I also scheduled a family meeting for that evening. It was time to reveal the full scope of what I knew and what I possessed. Dorothy arrived home that evening looking shell-shocked. Victor was with her, apparently now openly part of her support system. Linda came separately, her face showing the strain of the past few days. "Before anyone says anything," I announced, "there's something you all need to understand about your situation." I spread the contents of my safety deposit box across the coffee table. Bank statements, investment records, property deeds, all bearing my name and numbers that made Dorothy gasp audibly. "What is this?" she whispered, staring at a statement showing an account balance of $1,400,000. "This is what you don't know about your husband," I said calmly. "This is what Victor doesn't know about his father-in-law. This is what Linda doesn't know about the man you were planning to lock away in an assisted living facility." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Linda's breath seemed to catch as she tried to process what I had just revealed. $2.8 million? Dorothy's voice was barely audible. Plus investment growth over 4 years. My current net worth is approximately $3,200,000. Linda stared at me as if I had just announced I was an alien from another planet. "Dad, that's not possible. We live in this little house. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. You clip coupons. I live modestly by choice. Linda, I wanted to see what kind of people you all were when you thought I had nothing to offer but my pension and my love." The impact of this revelation was immediate and devastating. I could see the calculations running behind their eyes, the realization of what they had thrown away, what they had risked, what they had lost. Victor was the first to speak. "You're a millionaire, and you let us think you were just some poor retiree?" "Yes. And now you understand what you've lost, Dorothy. You threw away a marriage to a man worth over $3 million so you could carry on an affair with a construction worker who makes $38,000 a year. The divorce proceedings took 6 months. Patricia Stone was as ruthless as promised. Dorothy received $4,200 from our joint checking account, her personal belongings, and her car. Everything else remained mine. Linda, devastated by Victor's betrayal, filed for divorce within a month. She moved back home temporarily while rebuilding her life. A year later, sit in my new home in the Colorado mountains, watching the sunrise paint the peaks in gold. The 10-acre property costs $650,000, purchased with cash. Linda visits often, our relationship rebuilt on honesty and mutual respect. Dorothy and Victor lasted 8 months together before their relationship crumbled under financial pressure and mutual distrust. Love built on betrayal rarely survives reality. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be taken advantage of, even by family. My new life is built on truth, dignity, and the hard-earned wisdom that respect must be demanded, not hoped for. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building a life so fulfilling that their betrayal becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. They thought they were playing me for a fool, but the real fool is someone who mistakes kindness for weakness and underestimates a man who's spent decades learning that patience and preparation always beat impulse and greed.